Well, welcome everybody. I'm so excited to be here. I'll be speaking with who many of you already know, Rachna Shah, who is the Global Chief Executive Officer at KCD. Welcome and welcome back, Rachna.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so we've come a long way, I think, since you participated in maybe our first or second performance summit. So it's exciting day, lots of speakers, and I know a lot of people are tuning in to kind of get all of your tips on how they can become the next CEO of one of fashion's biggest PR agencies. So we have a lot of people from people starting their career to other people that you've probably worked with, your entire career. So thanks for making the time to chat with us.
Happy to be here.
So like I said, I think a lot of us know you, but a lot of people also tuning in are kind of on this journey. And, I just thought it'd be a great way to start the day, start the morning, talk a little bit about your journey, reflect on how you got here. And, maybe, I don't know, is this what you always wanted to do? Like if you look back and think about where you are and where you started?
Yeah, I have to say, I had no idea growing up what PR was. I think everyone knows advertising. That's what's on the TV. Like that's what people understand. And so at that point, I certainly did not understand what PR was. And I was not necessarily, should I say this, but a fashion, passion girl. Like, of course I enjoyed it. I loved it, but I didn't think like this is the direction I'm going in. But I had a lot of internships during college. I went to NYU. I was in New York. I studied French. I was in Paris. Like little things led me to experiences in relation to fashion. So there was a fashion department at a magazine. Then there was Barney's and being in the PR and events team there. And then it was like, okay, I understand now what PR is. I understand the fashion world a little more. I would like to keep moving in this direction. And I had an opportunity to work at a multi-brand house, IFA. And so I was there and I understood, okay, if you're like kind of more on the brand side, how does this work? And what are the different parts of PR? And by that point, I had heard of KCD. It certainly had a wonderful history and legacy around it. So it was one of my goals and targets. And I was fortunate enough to get a job there literally out of college. So yeah, for those who don't know, I've literally been in this company for 27 years at this point, which is quite unusual, but it totally made sense for me.
I think that's reassuring. The first part is, that you don't have to be like a fashion aficionado to actually be successful in this industry, because I think it's important to be passionate about the work that you do, but it doesn't mean you have to be an expert when you start. And obviously talking about your career journey, it seems like you learned a lot both on the job and from empowering yourself to learn.
I did. And I was super lucky, like to find a place that became my home. I think it's a couple of different reasons why that worked. Obviously, I got exposed to a variety of clients or types of activities. There was events, there were shows, there was parties, there was, just pure PR, there was collection management. Like there were so many different elements to it. And then with so many different types of clients. So it really kept me interested because you didn't feel like you were doing the same thing every day. And I had great mentors. So that was a huge part of my career trajectory. Is that, I don't know, if I hadn't worked for Ed Filipowski and Julie Mannion, would I have stayed? If those weren't the people that I was working for. So, if people are looking for, how to retain their teams or how to, that's the biggest part of it, is people have to love what they do, but also who they do it with.
Completely. I think too, the challenge now is that things do move so fast and people forget how important that mentorship is and how it really develops your career. I think that actually leads me to like another question. I kind of been wondering how you would describe yourself as this, because apart from, being a good coach means being a good leader. And today, obviously, we're talking a lot about performance, and the people that drive performance are people that think about leadership. So I was curious, how would you describe your leadership style?
I mean, I think I challenge my team. I'm certainly not someone who's like, oh, that sounds good, or not like understanding the big picture. I really challenge them to think outside the box, to challenge the client and like lead the client as opposed to being just reactive to what they're asked to do. Like if something seems maybe not like a great next step for the brand, talk about it, ask the question, why are you headed in that direction, or what are you looking to do? So I think, ultimately it's really about service. So it's like, how do we provide the best service for clients? And that is not to be their implementers or their workforce. It's to help them think outside the box, think strategically, brainstorm, use the knowledge that we have about different experiences that we've been through, and really help strengthen where they're headed next. So, from a leadership style point of view, I hope that that is taken as some working with someone who's really trying to elevate the way that you think, and is not just there to say yes or no, right or wrong, but more to help you grow in your style of thinking.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good takeaway too, that just because somebody questions doesn't mean that they don't think you're competent, doesn't mean that you don't have good ideas, but they know that there's something else in you, or there's something else that you could deliver. And
Definitely. And it's important to challenge each other, like internally for sure, but also with clients or with the media. There are times where you have to stop and say, from a PR perspective, I don't know if this is that interesting of a story for my client. Like, it's not that I don't want to help you out, but could we think about it this way? Or have you thought about it that? And again, not to criticize, but more to bring other points of view to the table.
I think something else obviously you guys are really good at, and that's just my perspective having worked with KCD for so many years. And it's interesting to hear you say that, because it takes a lot of confidence also to lead the client versus just serve the client.
Yeah.
And I guess obviously this isn't something we talked about before, but that is what makes like great agencies or great marketers or great PR people, is understanding that actually my goal is to provide the best outcome. And it
For sure.
doesn't matter if it's, of course you want the person to be happy, but you also want them to be satisfied. And
Yes.
I think that's a new
And to
concept.
be on that journey, right? So it's not about thinking about this one moment or this one launch or this one event, but where are we headed? So a lot of times people will come to us and say, oh, we'd love to work with you, and here's what, you all are so great at doing. So help us launch this product or collection, right? And it's like, okay, but who are you, and who are you to your customer, and who do you want to be, and how does this product or collection fit into that? Like, let's make sure we actually dive into the why. And I would hope that most brands would have that answer. They just sometimes don't communicate it
Mhm.
to a team or to their employees or the PR team. I mean, obviously they did some thinking about it, I would hope, in development, but we like to be part of the bigger conversation. And I think that has to do with internally and externally, meaning like, I love seeing employees who think about all of the groups of our agency. So when they, look at an event, they think about, how did we produce it? Especially when we're all working on it together, like, how was it produced? What were the social implications of this? It's not just the guest list and who gets seated. It's, what did they bring value wise from a social perspective? Or, did they get the best experience out of it, the best pictures out of it, because of how it was produced? So it's like thinking about more than, I love to hear an advertising plan. I love to hear the marketing, like consumer marketing plan, and how all of those elements fit together. And I think internally it's the same.
I think that's interesting you bring up the different departments at KCD, and obviously the business has evolved a lot. You know, thinking of leadership, how has the leadership dynamic changed over the years, and you know, what has that and how has that evolved, and what has that brought the agency?
I mean, I think there was a time where, we felt like, I mean, at that point, it was two distinct groups, right? We were creative led in terms of production and fashion services, so all the back of house elements that go with putting a collection together. And then it was the media relations and PR side. And sure, we worked together on things, but I think the line was more clear between the two. And the evolution of it was, and it's been in process for probably the past 10 years to 15 years of really thinking about how do we work together and what can we offer that, to be honest, we're the only agency that does all of those things to the extent that we do. So more than half of our business is, creatively produced events or front of house for events. And then the other half is the media relations, PR, digital side of everything. So the evolution was very much more about how do these areas work together? How do we really fine tune that? Okay, we can produce a great event, but if our production team does not understand how the guest experience should be, then it doesn't matter how great it looked if people couldn't get in. Right. And and that happens a lot of times. So I had to kind of make things work together, how to create the right photo op, the moments that really get taken away. And obviously, once everything went, whether live stream or just socially led, the fact you needed the people there to share this event with everyone on the outside. So, that definitely happened. So I think it's a mindset of understanding that there are so many elements to a strong PR plan and PR strategy, and activations and events have become, kind of the linchpin to them all.
For sure. And I think actually what you described about sometimes businesses working in silos and this disconnect is probably one of the biggest challenges brands face. I can't remember who said it, but the famous old phrase, like, you have to get out of your own way. And
Yes.
sometimes
Yes.
companies are so focused on each department being successful that actually they don't step back to say, if we just work together better, we'd be even more successful. And I guess when you guys go into some clients, you're only working on one segment. You are the one that's kind of like, hey guys, we can't be disconnected. It's okay, you're not working with us for everything. You're going to do something in-house, but we all still need to talk together.
Yeah. And that's why we've developed such a great rapport with our colleagues at other agencies, other production teams, et cetera, because we speak their language. So the creative group speaks the language of the other PR teams, whether they're in-house or at another agency, or, the media relations team speaks the same language as the other production teams. And so a lot of times we can really work together to like help the client navigate, because they're so many times in the middle. And so we're like, no, let's all get on that call together and talk through what this is. Like, we can't play this, pinball machine of you're talking to them and coming back to us, and then we're talking to you and you're going back to them. Like, happy to do this together. Collaboration makes things so much more efficient. And then on site, it helps with everything, it's such a better experience for the guest.
I would love to like go into your brain and pick all these like really funny moments. I mean, I just think of so many huge events that could have been crazy that I know you've been in the center of between all of those different elements over the years. So, and in many different cities too. Like I've seen you in Milan at like a very posh, casual, quiet show. Then thinking of like Victoria's Secret in Miami. I mean, like such like a wide variety of things too. And, I've obviously there's a lot of ups and downs in a career, and the journey is long and hard but fruitful, I guess I could say. Resilience often plays a pivotal role in someone's career. Maybe you could share a little bit about how resilience has shaped your career and any advice you have on that.
I mean, I genuinely believe that if you don't love what you do, especially in this industry, it's not worth doing. And it's just, it takes a lot of time mentally, physically. It's not a 9 to 5 job. It's not a Monday through Friday job. Like, we have definitely worked in the past 4 years, especially, to maintain a better work environment, in terms of, okay, we can set some boundaries here. Let's change our hours a little bit. Let's look at work from home in a different way. I mean, for sure, the upside of the pandemic was a fresh take, because once you got everyone home, you're like, okay, we're starting from scratch a little bit. Like, we can't go back to the way it was. So, by all means, I think it's important that every company acknowledges the changes that have happened in our society. But ultimately, it's like, if you don't love it, find something else to do, because it's just too hard, and it takes too much of a toll. So it's important to acknowledge what you love about what you're doing, and also acknowledge the challenges, like what is hard for you. So, if you have the opportunity to individualize your job at all, I think I take into account more like the people who are, you can't always be strong at everything. So acknowledge what you may not be as strong at, and see if there's a way to incorporate more of the things that are your strengths into your day-to-day, so it doesn't feel overwhelming, right? So I think that kind of communication is super important. But yeah, it's a lot, and you've got to love it. And a lot of people will come up to me at events and be like, oh, you're always so calm. And in my mind, I'm like, really? Am I? Because I don't feel that way. But I do think I've learned that it's not worth, like, my stress level and anxiety level is not worth being in that constant state of hyper vigilance. Like, you have to trust the process. And now that I'm going to a lot more of our activations and events, and all the cities, and just being more a part of what we're doing globally, I realized more like, okay, I'm here to support, I'm here to cheer on, I'm here to jump in where needed, but I do not have to carry the weight of the entire thing. There is a team, there's a process, they have learned it, they're great at what they do. And, if everyone treats it that way, then the stress level goes down, and that's how you can stay resilient, is if you can actually control that bit.
I think that could be a whole separate session on,
Yeah, totally.
management and coaching and entrusting younger leaders to step up. And I know that's obviously a desire for so many people today. So,
Next one, that'll be our next.
exactly. We talked about this earlier. You were talking about from the time that you started KCD and what you already knew about it. You guys have had such a brilliant history. What have been the most significant challenges the agency has faced, and how do you think you guys have navigated them?
I mean, look, it's hard to not acknowledge the pandemic. I don't think anyone in this industry, for hopefully for all time, will have anything of a worse situation. And it was, when what you do is based on in-person activity, and that completely stops for over a year, it's significant. But even in other times of economic downturn, believe me, the first thing that everyone is about to say at all times is, the retail is done. No one's shopping, no one's doing. And sure, by 2008 was a really tough time as well. And but I think what's important is to really know how to run a business that can what's the best way to say this? Kind of like grow and shrink based on realities of economy, right? So working really closely with clients to be able to say, and obviously you have to run a tight ship in order to do this financially, but to be able to say, we know that you have to cut your budgets.
Mm.
Here's how we could still work together.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we have to cut our output, right? The hard part is when someone says, we want you to do the same thing for less, and
That's
that's
the dream for them.
for them. But how to really say like, okay, we'll do this part of it. And why don't you guys do that internally and let's see how that goes. And we could try it for 6 months. Let's see if this helps your bottom line. Or if you end up just spending more internally, you might as well just have the resources. There were a lot of teams that downsized, during the pandemic. And so in a sense, the need for an agency became stronger.
Yeah.
Because they did not want to add to that headcount again.
Exactly.
Or they slowly came back to where they were. So in an unusual sense, it brought us back to the table with some brands that were like, nope, we're doing this all ourselves. We're going to build our own team. We're going to do it in-house. Thank you so much. And we're fine. And then it was like, oh, actually, we don't have the hands anymore. And it was great. It was a great way to kind of come back into some dialogues and make things, happen. But it was, it really taught us, I think, how important it is to partner with your clients and figure out ways of work. Like if you're just cut and dry about it, like either you're all in or you're not, it's not going to work because they need help. Like they want you to continue doing everything, but they have a budget. And so they need your help on how to be creative with it. Sometimes for sure. Yeah. I mean, and I think the other challenge has been the change of society and how we work and expectations of employees. For so many years, we were so lucky to have such long tenured employees, and we still do. But I remember that feeling when, someone would leave, I took it personally.
Right.
Like when that first kind of started happening more often. And you're like, really? And it was a generational shift, obviously, for me, because I stayed forever. But also, it just was a generational shift where people were like, I feel like I should try something. I think I'm supposed to. And it wasn't even necessarily always for a particular opportunity.
Mm.
And so that was a really hard challenge of like how to wrap my head around having to replace people, right? And like that there will be a door that opens and closes. A lot of times there will be certain longevity and certain tenure, but then the rest will change. And what I realized is once I relaxed about it, it was like, if you really look back, pretty much in every case, whoever came next either was just as good or better, like for the most part.
Yeah.
Right. And that just meant that we had also fine-tuned what we were looking for, or we were able to be a little more specific, so the role kind of shifted according to someone's new profile. So learning flexibility in the workforce and how to just be like, we can keep going. Like, this is not losing someone is not the end of the world. We can really work on how to bring people in, but how to still try to keep growing as much as we can so that there are people who really feel like, okay, they know how we do things inside and out and are still inspired to be here and continue that work.
Yeah, I think that is so true anywhere that with anyone that has a great team. I mean, it's both professional and personal in a way. Because it's almost like a breaking up with someone. But it's interesting if you are ever, and I shouldn't say this tip on this call for your competitors are joining, but if you ever are looking for a really good, PR or influencer person or anyone that's like adjacent to that industry, I just look for anyone that's worked at KCD In fact, a
Oh,
lot of times when I'm looking for new marketing team members, did they intern at KCD? Did they work there some time before? So you should
I
be
will
proud
take that
actually
as a
about
compliment.
how many
So I
people
feel like
actually have gone on to work at the brands that we at Launchmetrics work with too. So
yeah.
it's kind of great.
But you know what? It's so nice to then work with people on the client side. I mean, to be honest, at this point, that's also a benefit. Right. Like it's actually
Exactly.
a benefit to us if they are somewhere else because then they want to work with the team that they know, or, we just, again, we speak the same language. So it makes anything together, so much simpler. But I am amazed sometimes at how many people are like, yeah, well, I interned there in, 2010, or I was a freelancer at this, or and I'm like, God, I hope I remembered exactly what you did at that time. It's quite amazing. It's a great
Absolutely.
lesson.
And so we spoke a little bit about the evolution of the industry and well, the industry, but also KCD. Part of that comes from innovation, right? That the industry is changing, people are innovating. I know that's been something you've been passionate about, and you've been actually part of that transformation in the business. It'd be great to share with other people, how you guys have innovated and your thoughts on how you've stayed ahead of the curve.
I mean, I think keeping ears and eyes open to what is happening in the industry is probably one of our top three most important things to do. Right. So whether that's okay, there's a shift in people aren't happy with the way that media is being monitored or how ROI is being determined, or people are looking for another way to justify their spend. So it can be from a numbers game, an impact. So being able to really use the resources we have to look at things differently, whether it's how to be more cost efficient, how to do things in a new way. It could be from a lighting vendor, it could be from a video vendor, it could be from so many different elements of what we do. So we try to really engage with the people that we feel are innovative in their specific area to see how it can apply to what we do. And then obviously, the looking for a better way of working is, how Fashion GPS came to be to begin with was, someone was using barcodes to do their sample inventory. And I was like, we should do that just like stores do. Why are we wasting time writing out invoices and all of these crazy things that used to happen? And so it was like, we had a great IT consultant, Eddie Mullen, who, I was like, how can we do this? And that's where the development of that came. And then obviously it was like, well, shouldn't that apply to everything that we do and not just samples and this and that? But so I think just really using your resources to come up with new ideas. And again, that means that's not the day-to-day of the job. That is not about a PR strategy or an event production job that you're doing. It's thinking about the space on a bigger picture level.
Yeah, I agree. And I remember those days of well, I mean, it goes into the next topic, obviously technology. And I do remember being at Bryant Park with clipboards and index cards and it just being so ridiculous and lines like wrapped around the fountain of people. And it was so gross. Like you think back and you have this nostalgic feeling, but it was gross, especially when it rained
I
and
know.
standing in heels on the cobblestones. And now, obviously, when you come to a show, whether it's through something like QR codes that you were saying, like that started with barcodes, but moved on to RFID at some of the shows, it really has been interesting how innovation and technology have transformed a bit the industry. And we've been fortunate enough with KCD to kind of be on the ground level of that. You know, obviously outside of what we do at Launchmetrics, technology is huge. You talked about data. Obviously
Mhm.
that's something we touch on, but there's so many other kind of escalations. How would you talk about how technology kind of, or how would you interpret its impact? Obviously it's been great, but what are the future challenge or future opportunities, not challenges, but maybe a
Sure.
bit challenging, that you could help us anticipate?
I mean, I will say, beginning in PR, right? I think the biggest evolution that has happened, thanks to technology, is the ability to assess ROI. The early days, there was very much a formula of everything PR related was basically determined based on ad value. So if it costs this much to buy an advertisement for a page in a magazine, then if you get a story that is as big of a page or a quarter of a page or half a page, whatever, that's the value of the work that you did. And, then there was, I mean, I guess it was Burrell's and then Cision. These are like very old, but that would tell you how many people probably read that page. And it would be like, well, how many of these magazines are in a doctor's office? Because then they probably passed through 7
Times
hands.
8.
Yeah, exactly. So everything was times this. It was so antiquated, but we had to have some starting point to just be able to. PR is a very weird field in the sense that advertising is equatable to how much did it cost, and then and consumer marketing is, well, how much did they buy? And PR is really in the middle. It's not one or the other. It's not as formulaic from a numbers standpoint. So everything that came technology-wise that was able to give more of an ROI, I mean, in a sense, the social media industry, I think, helped save PR because it showed that media were not the only voices. Media voices were special because they have knowledge, they have credibility, they have influence in a different way. But then it's like there was other ways to measure where that impact landed. So I think it really helped to add more measurement capabilities to what we were doing and how we were doing it. So I think all of the ways that, ROI can be assessed, looked at, some of it's a bit crazy. I'm like, what about just, it feels good, there's, what about like, that was so cool. Can we add that into the evaluation? But I think also then the store experience, I think was also impacted tremendously by technology. I still sometimes, when I think about the difference between like an airline, like when you go to the desk to check in somewhere, or any kind of airline technology, it is the worst of the worst. From booking tickets to getting checked in to being in front of, I'm like, what are you typing? I think someone did a spoof
Exactly.
on
Why are
that.
you typing for so long?
I was like, I don't understand what's happening here. So if you look at like that being kind of the bottom of the scale, I think you could really look at, event activations and things like checking in or, pulling results or doing comparisons, like such a world of difference from how it used to work.
For sure. I obviously remember when we were building MIV, and it was so nice, obviously, having someone like you in the room talking to our data scientists and being like, it's true that according to the algorithm, it says this, but then we would times it by 8. They're like, but why would you times it by 8? Because there could have been 8 other people that read it. They're like, but that's what the algorithm takes into consideration. And you're like, but it's I felt like it was worth $50, not 100 or not 25. So I would just change that number, and we need to be able to edit that. And they're like, but that's just made up numbers. We're like, yeah, but it sometimes works like that.
There is like a little kind of top line that should be more based on emotion.
Yeah.
There has to be.
I think my other favorite thing too, explaining to the developers is well, why do we need to double or triple seat someone at a fashion show? Oh, because they're not sure who will come. But what if both people come? Where will you seat them? Well, they could sit on the bench together. Well, why wouldn't you just have 2 seats there? You're trying to explain the most illogical industry to the most
I
logical
know.
people.
We never double seat, Alison, just so you know. We
We
might,
obviously work
but
with
we
tons of
never double see.
we work with tons of agencies. I didn't say this
Yeah.
before too, but you know, it is really sad though, thinking back to COVID. And you said like luckily you guys were resilient and you had a positive outcome. But I was reviewing a list of agencies specifically in New York and London, and it's so sad to see how many of us didn't make it. You know, COVID was really hard on the industry as a whole. So for the big brands, they're quite lucky that they had that ability to, just like you guys, to kind of pull back and then grow after. But it's been really interesting to see what's happened. And obviously, everyone could have comments about COVID, but it was something I looked at last night and I was quite surprised.
Yeah, it really was a mark of time that, there will be so many before and afters. But I will say, it also was the birth of a lot of great independent talent starting their own thing and giving a different kind of service for the brands that, were looking for a little bit more of an individualized plan, or someone who could be more of the right hand to them where they couldn't fit it internally. And it was a great way for a lot of people to learn how to run a business or what they wanted to do, and they had the impetus to like go for it during that time, which I think is inspiring. We use and work with a lot of the former colleagues who are now doing their own work, where I'm like, listen, I don't have the capability right now. Maybe I don't have the right person on my team who is available to take this on, but so-and-so is amazing. And I am happy to I can make referrals. Do you know what
Yeah,
I mean?
sure.
Whereas in the past, it was a little bit more like, I can make referrals, but it's like the agency to agency, which is a little bit different than, sharing it with someone where you know exactly how they work.
Hmm.
And you feel confident that this will help the brand that you're working on, you know?
Absolutely.
So it kind of went both ways, and it was tough because I do think there were some challenges and conversations about big agencies versus, it's like, no, it's all about the service. You know what I mean? Sometimes you need a bigger team to give the service to the brand of a certain scale. Sometimes you need a team that has their hands in a lot of areas to help a young designer who needs more resources, who needs more insight that they can gain because of the other work that we do. And sometimes they need someone who is really can be more devoted
Yeah,
strictly to what they are. And so it's like there's value in all of that. It's just what's the right fit for each brand.
I think that's a really important point too. Just they don't know what they need. Some people just need hand holding. They don't need an agency, they need a buddy. So,
Right.
and I wasn't going to go here, but I feel like thinking back to the topic that I brought up before about all these different events that you've worked on, and there have been some crazy moments and really funny moments. And yeah, I don't know. You've worked on so many fashion weeks, so many fashion events. I know personally from my own experience that they kind of create these unforgettable moments. Maybe you could share one of your craziest stories.
Okay, so my
If you're allowed to. We don't
absolute
have to say
story.
names.
No, I have so many, but my absolute craziest story was probably doing the Victoria's Secret show right after Hurricane Sandy, which was a massive, for those of you, if you did not experience this, massive, massive hurricane that really shut down New York City and the greater area around it. And the hurricane happened about 10 days before the show.
Wow. I
So
didn't
a
know.
lot of it was done, it was a televised outing. So it's like that show was going to happen no matter what, because we needed to record it. We weren't sure what the guest experience would be, but like, okay, we're going to try to get through this. Our office was closed because of water damage. Launchmetrics, known as Fashion GPS at that time, was off because the server was flooded.
Yeah.
So we had our list was gone. Our data was gone, our content, all of the work that we had done on the event was gone, just from even a
This is
list.
probably why Amazon makes so much money from us now, you know?
Yeah. That was the impetus, right? I mean, for so many companies, like your cloud server changed its value for sure.
Innovation.
Yeah, for sure. But fortunately, there was a girl Lane on the team who had like downloaded the list to Excel. So we went back to old school 101, but I was the only one who knew how to do old school 101. So it was like teaching this team.
We're
We
like,
were
go
in
to CVS, buy index cards. They're like, what are index cards for?
I was like, how do you do Excel lists, right? So all of the manipulations of Excel, which are still insane to me, but amazing. I think it's the best software that was ever created, like in terms of what it can do. But so all the Excel hacks, how to do a mail merge. We have to like print labels or
The
print
most painful
cards.
thing ever. Yeah.
The worst thing to have to teach. We did not have a network, so we had a computer that belonged to the printer that you had to email to that computer in order to print anything. We were working out of the Victoria's Secret offices, but we were not allowed to be on their network because that was a whole, endeavor at that point. So we didn't even have like all the supplies and all it just was, and then it was ice storm the day of the show. So like the after party had to be moved because you couldn't, like the location it was supposed to be at never got to finish construction because of the hurricane. Like all construction was done. So it was a brand new club or space. So we had to move the after party to somewhere else. And then there was ice all over the street. I mean, whatever. It was the fact that it happened and it actually went really well was shocking. But then I also just I have so many fun stories I used to always do the door. So being at the door at events in, Paris and London and New York and Milan, wherever it was, you get the best stories of people who try to come in. There was like, I remember it was a Versace couture show in Paris. I mean, very high end. It was the after party or after event for it. And there were these like two kids who came up and they're like, yeah, we're invited. And I was like, oh, do you have your invitation? It was this hard invitation days. Do you have your invitation? Oh no, we left it at the hostel. And I was like, I gotta tell you, if you're staying at a hostel, like you're not going to this event. But like they didn't even know how to, they probably
Fashion
didn't know
party.
what the event was. Like who knows? So I've had lots of laughs over the years. I don't like when things get unsafe, and I think people are a little aggressive with doors now. But I had a lot of laughs at just seeing like the tactics that people would go to.
I mean, that was my favorite part about Fashion Week, honestly. It makes it all so worthwhile.
I know. And nowadays there's so many people who are like, remember when I crashed that Marc Jacobs show in like 1999? I was like, yeah, I do. But I don't hold it against you anymore.
I mean, to be fair, I remember, I won't say his name, but big New York Times writer, like when we were still, in Bryant Park, was like, I used to come and crash parties all the time, and now people beg me to come. So I guess that's how the industry goes, right?
Right. I used to get emails from this kid at the time at Comcast.net who would always request for shows. And I was like, who are you? And why would we let you in? And he was like a teenager, Well, he's a very, respected kind of social covering writer now. And we laugh about it all the time. I was like, how many times did you get a response from me? And he's like, well, at least you responded. And I was like,
True.
true, that's true. I did respond to you and say no, but I did respond. So that's a good sign.
And okay, so I want to just take a few questions before the top of the hour. I'll take one question from the audience, and then I have one kind of wrap up question. Obviously, I guess being at the door, you could be intimidating. Maybe that's where this comes from. But they said, I'm curious who, if anyone, intimidates you, and then conversely, who inspires you?
Well, the inspiring part is a lot easier, to be honest. No, I mean, I'm so inspired by creative talent. I think it's not something I know how to do. It's not something I understand. So working with designers is just so inspiring, and hearing how they got to where they got and what they're able to make, and also like how they run their teams. Like they have studios and ateliers and or production teams, big to small. That whole process of design to production is still incredible to me, and how to like bring that vision to life. So I'm very inspired by creativity. I'm a much more, logical, logistical thinker and worker. So I love to kind of see the big ideas that are brought to the table by designers. And intimidating, I think I'm most intimidated by
Excel.
Excel. So true. I still am like, how did you do that? How did you sort that way? No, I'm most intimidated, honestly, by people who think in a box, like when they just really are driven by the way they always did it or the way that they think it should be done. And they want everyone around them to do things the exact same way. Like that's actually intimidating because I don't know how to talk to them. I don't know how to engage because it's like very, I mean, I'm going to say it's old school, but it's like very old school way of thinking where it's like, this is who we are. This is the only message that should ever come out in a story, from a PR perspective. Like this is the only kind of story that should be running. And like you have to get that story or it doesn't count. And to me, that's intimidating because I don't have any basis of dialogue with the person to say, this is why the media was like not buying your story. They didn't understand what you were trying to get across. They didn't hear it that way.
Right.
Even if you delivered it, they didn't hear it. And they don't want to hear that. They just think like we did it wrong or the team did it wrong. And so that's like really a losing battle.
And it's probably reassuring for some people on this call to hear you say that too, because I think people are quite intimidated when they're put in those scenarios and they don't actually know how to respond, whether it's a client, a boss, and
Yep.
because the world's evolving.
Yeah, what happens from a management standpoint too, and I'm not saying I am never in that position because sometimes you're working at such a pace that you need everyone to just do it this way. I'm happy to talk about it later, you know what I mean? But like, we need to like move forward or, I do know what I'm talking about. Like, let's just
Like, give
go
me
with
some
it.
credit.
Yeah, like let's not question it right now. But I think, so I understand where that comes from, but I think that sometimes it's the default and that's like really tough, really tough.
Okay, guys, I'm sorry, but we're almost out of time, so I'm going to use the last few minutes to ask my question. But I think it's something you guys want to know too. Everyone tuned in because now you are the new global chief CEO of KCD. You guys work with the biggest brands, do some of the coolest activations, hold the keys to the biggest fashion shows. Everyone kind of wants to know like what to expect next in the near future, how you're future-proofing the agency for tomorrow's shifts. What can we look to see?
I think what we have challenged ourselves with this year is how to work smarter and not harder. And I say that on the behalf of clients, I say it internally. I say, I think everything that we do, it's like, did it have to be done that way? Do we need to spend that much money? Did the brand need to do it in 10 places? Could it have been resolved this way? Like, how can we help guide the brands strategically? And to be honest, like, yes, we're so fortunate to work with a lot of big brands and doing what they do. I love working with independent brands too, who, really, those next steps matter so much in their trajectory. Like you get to be so impactful in where they are. But same, it's like, how do we challenge ourselves to help them think of new ways of doing things or how to break through the noise. It is really hard when you're up against these major advertisers and, huge houses and legacy designers and all of that. So it's like, where do you find your place? And you're not going to be that necessarily, but that doesn't mean you don't have an impact or an audience or, the customer who wants to be a part of what you do. And then I apply that internally. I think that I'm trying to find a lot of efficiencies, trying to figure out ways to make more for what we do instead of doing more and making more. That's the bottom line. Like, how can I improve the quality of our employees? Everyone's like, oh, we can't raise the fee, we can't do this. And I'm like, I have to raise everyone's salaries. Right? Like, just
Yeah.
like you two, like, I don't, how else am I doing it? I can't just make them do more work.
Yep.
So I think finding that balance and really trying to communicate and understand with clients, like, what is a normal course of action, right? Not be extreme, but just we're all here to support each other, and we got to find ways to do that. So that's what I'm using this platform for, is to try to help the industry make smarter choices and to, do more for a reason and less just because.
I think that's a great motto for everyone to take. And that's what we hope this summit is about, right? Like, how can everyone work better? So I think that's a great closing few words, like a soundbite you planned. Thank you again so much for taking the time. I obviously know you're busy and this is what you want to do first thing when you wake up, see everyone virtually. So thank you so, so much and have a great rest of your day. And to everyone else tuning in, if you missed any of this, it'll be on demand. So you can watch Rachna every single morning when you wake up. Well, thanks again and speak to you soon.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Bye,
Okay,
everyone.
bye.